Welcome back, everyone. We will now begin the final session of the day, part of the Global Social Progress Week, led by the International Panel on Social Progress, IPSP. This session connects our national youth dialogue with global conversations on justice, sustainability, and human flourishing. This session will be moderated by Dr. Hossain Zillur Rahman. To set the stage, may I now invite Dr. Hossain Zillur Rahman to provide the context and trigger questions for this global youth dialogue.
Good afternoon to colleagues in Dhaka and in Paris and across the world, to this side event of the International Panel of Social Progress, on Social Progress, Global Social Progress Week. This is a side event of that international event. We have a youth panel on perspectives on social progress from the youth. And we have 4 members of across the youth spectrum in Bangladesh. They will self-introduce themselves. Without further ado, we will start, but before that, I also want to introduce my colleague in Paris, Olivier Bouin, Professor Olivier Bouin, who is co-executive director of the board of the International Panel on Social Progress. He will be monitoring the chat box and directing questions from the global audience for this panel. Welcome, Olivier.
Welcome, Hossain, and welcome all of you to the Global Social Progress Week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will start with the idea of social progress is not self-evident. People can put different meanings into this idea of social progress. At the IPSP, we have really taken a larger view of this idea of social progress, in particular, taking into account the complex range of crises and uncertainties that afflict today's contemporary world. We are looking at the challenges of human flourishing in the context of climate vulnerability, in the context of democratic uncertainty, and in the context of technological revolutions, which hold both promise and threats. So the youth panel in Dhaka will really try to address some of the issues, not all of the issues, that IPSP has prioritized for the discussion on social progress. I would like to first invite Shamir Shehab, who will be speaking on the issue of human flourishing in the context of climate uncertainty. The planet and humans both need to be in our focus. I would invite Shamir to expand on his views on how this particular agenda of social progress animates his own work. Shamir Shehab.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. I'm a bit under the weather, so please bear with me with my voice. So my name is Shamir Shehab. I graduated from the youth category some time back, so I don't fall into that. With that caveat, I'm starting by asking you a question. How many of you know that what is the biggest source of oxygen on the planet Earth? If you know, can I please see your hand? What is the biggest source of oxygen? I see a hand right over there. Would you please shout out, what is the biggest source of oxygen? One of the, but not the biggest source of oxygen. Who is brave enough to shout it out on the back? Ocean. Exactly, right? But many of us would think tree probably is the Amazon forest is the biggest source of oxygen, but that's not. The ocean is the biggest source of oxygen. Now, coming back to talk about how that is related to climate and environment, the mainstream climate and environmental discourse in Bangladesh is primarily talks about climate, climate, climate in a very reductionist, linear way without considering the complexity of it. So there are 9 planetary boundaries that actually sustain, make sure that this planet Earth is stable and human can prosper. And ocean that you mentioned is the biggest source of oxygen and one of those 9 planetary boundaries. The other one is climate change, land use change, and so on and on. But nobody talks about those things. And as late as 2 weeks back, out of these 9 planetary boundaries, the 7 planetary boundaries are already overshot beyond their safe operating space. What that I mean? By that I mean, if I increase the temperature of this room up to, let's say, 40 degrees Celsius, you may survive, sweat. But what would happen if I increase the temperature above 60 degrees Celsius? Would you be able to survive? Would you? No? So there is a capacity to which you can tolerate, right? Similarly, these 9 planetary boundaries, for these 9 planetary boundaries, Earth system scientists have identified that there are safe operating space or limit to which we can actually, within which this Earth can survive. So think about it. 7 out of 9 of those planetary boundaries are already overshot beyond the safe operating limit. And if you look at it in the graph or in the picture, you will see it's a significant overshoot. Now, take this metaphor and analogy. If you identify 7 important or 9 important organs of your body, and 7 of them, let's say your sugar level is high, your kidney is not functioning properly, and so on and on, would you be able to, what do you call it? But we need to go to the ICU, right? So that's the state of the planet, my first point. Now the question is, who is responsible for that? And when we talk about climate, I'm particularly asked to talk about climate justice, so that is important. Who is responsible for this overshoot of these planetary boundaries? If you look into not just the greenhouse gas emission per capita, if you look into the ecological footprint of the individuals, in the global south countries, our per capita footprint is far, 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 far lower than the ecological footprint of anyone living in the global north. And that need to be taken into cognizance if we would like to talk about the climate justice. Now, my second point, also related to first point, in Bangladesh, anywhere you go to, the first line that you will hear, Bangladesh is the most vulnerable countries on the planet. That to some extent is true. Bangladesh is perhaps also one of the most resilient countries on the planet Earth. And it has a very unique deltaic system that nobody talks about and nobody takes into cognizance. There are not exactly hypotheses, there are provocative thoughts that if Bangladesh could have adapted the natural way of dealing our climate, not really doing this hard infrastructure, Bangladesh could have adapted much, much better than the way we are trying to deal with the climate change currently right now we're doing. So the point I'm trying to make here is that climate problem is not simply a technical problem. It is to some extent, but fundamentally it's a governance issue. The lack of accountability, lack of transparency, and also this governance is not participatory. In the earlier session, I heard some of you were speaking coming from different parts of the country. Some of the conversation, what resonates with me is that at the local level, it's excellent, nice policies on paper, brilliant one. But when it comes to the implementations and real effect on the ground, you will find a very, very bleak picture. Sometimes it's very, very shameful. The reason is, my personal take is, the way the policies are being made and drafted and crafted, and who actually push for those policies, often by very elite people like you and me who are sitting in this room. It's not really in a participatory process coming from the grassroots So when it comes to the implementation, people not really have the ownership of those policies, have no incentives of those policies. And what also happened, see, besides climate, there are forests, there are canals, there are rivers, our very unique and rich ecosystem. In our mainstream climate and environmental discourse, nobody talks, very few conversation around that. Very few conversation around political economy, how it is structured. Very few conversation about political ecology, how without political commitment, this environmental justice is not really possible to ensure. Sir, how many minutes do I have? 2 minutes? I'll finish shortly. So what I'm trying to say, until and unless this governance mechanism is participatory, that means there are brilliant work by Ilnar Ostrom on how these are commons, right? River, canals, and forests should be managed. Until and unless the people who depend on those natural resources have access to them, has ownership to them, and given them the right to govern them, I find it very hard to see how we are able to protect and save Bangladesh from the looming climate and environmental catastrophe that's already happening, and it's going to intensify in moving forward. My last point, youth, right? Majority in this room are young people. How do we really now come in here and contribute here? I would say I see a lot of youth conversation, youth are being prioritized and so on, but I think we shouldn't let that to be tokenistic. That, okay, we need a youth boys, let's bring in youth, but not really listening for the sake of bringing in youth on the podium, but not really saying what perspectives, I'm not putting myself into that youth person's shoes and trying to understand what perspective this person is saying. So in a meeting, actually, day before yesterday, I was with some senior professor. I was saying, sir was saying that this should be that way done. I say, no, that's the Genji way done. That's why you see what the disconnect is coming from, and that's why you were so inefficient. But anyway, I was trying to convey is the youth has a very different way of looking at, thinking at it, and it's not for understanding that we really have to be actively listening to it. And also with technological ruptures and with technology, it fundamentally will change the society, the values, ethics, and so on. So I think this is going to be an important challenge moving forward. So I think youth need to be cognizant of that and engage with that in a way that there could be meaningful contributions. So with that, I think I'll end here, and I will come back again probably later. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamir. Shehab. You issued a warning about the planetary boundaries being crossed. You mentioned about the issue of justice, who is to blame for this. You mentioned about the gap between policy and implementation, and you also mentioned about a listening deficit when it comes to talking to youth. We talk to them, but we don't listen or understand. Thank you for those important points. Next, we will move to a different aspect of social progress. Because social progress is also about economic justice, not just climate justice. And we have now this discussion of going beyond GDP. How can economic flourishing be more democratized, etc.? And for this important aspect, I'm inviting now Namira, Shameem to expand on these themes.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman, and greetings to everyone joining us here in Dhaka and across the world. When we talk about progress, we often start with numbers. GDP growth rates, per capita income, fiscal targets. These are the metrics that dominate public imagination and policymaking. Yet, as young people living in times of polycrises, from climate shocks to job precarity, from digital inequality to social fragmentation, we are increasingly aware that growth rates alone don't ensure progress. The question I want to pose today is very simple. What are we missing when we measure progress only through GDP? GDP captures activity, but not the quality of that activity. It counts rebuilding after floods as a gain, but does not count the human losses that precede it. It records the sale of antidepressants, for example, but not the despair that drives their demand. It values extraction, not restoration, consumption, not connection. Take employment, for example. GDP measures the value of what we produce once we have a job. So our income, our output, our contribution to the economy. But it says nothing about the effort that goes behind finding that job, the months of searching, the rejection emails, the despair of those who never get a call back. In a world where job precarity has become the new normal, where young people are told to be endlessly adaptable, yet find themselves perpetually insecure, this silence is striking. The system counts our productivity, but not our struggle. In Bangladesh, we see this clearly. Our recent PPRC real economy study, for example, illustrates the gap between numbers and lived reality. While official GDP figures suggest recovery, households' real incomes remain stagnant or even on the decline. Employment insecurity and underemployment persist, particularly among youths and women, even as aggregate growth looks promising. When households report cutting meals, taking informal loans, or spending 50% of their monthly income on food, we see how prosperity on paper conceals vulnerability on the ground. So if GDP cannot capture our true well-being, what can? I believe we must shift towards indicators that center dignity and equity. Number one, social cohesion and trust. Are communities resilient in times of crisis? Do people trust their institutions and feel heard within them? As our earlier sessions today showed, many young Bangladeshis are deeply motivated. They want to lead, serve, rebuild faith and collective action, yet they often face structures that marginalize their voice. Shamir Bhai earlier mentioned a tokenistic approach and listening to youth voices or the listening deficit. A truly progressive society, however, is one where participation is power, not privilege. Number two is equality of opportunity. Economic growth has meaning only when it expands choices for everyone. This means access to decent work, education, healthcare, but also the ability to imagine a future with agency. If young people cannot find dignified employment, if women are still denied safe public spaces, if rural children are left behind in digital learning, then progress remains partial. Our earnings are insufficient to meet rising living costs. Our aspirations often outpace opportunities. GDP growth rates do not show this frustration, but it's precisely these realities that define social progress. Thirdly, and finally, emotional well-being. A quieter crisis, the mental and emotional strain of modern life. In our communities, we hear stories of anxiety, depression, fatigue, loneliness, often among those who appear successful by GDP metrics. Social progress must include the health of both the environment and the human spirit. It must ask, are we living better or merely faster? So human flourishing captures this. It measures how well people are actually doing socially, physically, emotionally, and morally, not just how much money or production they generate. So as Amartya Sen reminded us, development is about freedom, the freedom to live the life we have reason to value. The freedom cannot be captured in quarterly figures. It lives in classrooms where young girls can dream without fear, in workplaces that honor care as much as productivity, in cities that are greener, safer, more humane. This also means rethinking how we measure success itself. Metrics are moral choices. What we count reflects what we care about and who we care for. As a youth researcher and a participant in the IPSP process, I see this as a generational task. We must democratize measurement itself, ensure that the we and what we value is inclusive. Voices from the global south, from informal workers, from women, from young citizens must shape the new social contract of measurement. Because if we do not define our own progress, someone else will, and in units we do not recognize. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Namira, Shameem, for again adding very important new aspects to the discussion on social progress. In particular, your last point about the urgency of democratizing measurement is a whole new way of looking at this whole issue. That measurement was taken simply as a technical job, but in democratizing measurement, it's both a professional work, but it's also ensuring you measure what is more important for important segments of the people. And also, I think your point about understanding well-being in multiple layers, certainly economic well-being, but also emotional well-being and social well-being is a very important, I think, addition to the whole discussion of social progress. Now I would like to bring in the whole issue of, which was hinted at by Namira, is about inclusion. Are all those who want to be in the room, are they allowed through the door? Are they, when they sit, do they get the voices? And when they talk, are those who need to listen, are they being listened to? On this whole issue of inclusion, Aonkita, please, your time now.
Am I audible? It's a bit too close to my... Okay. So I'll just introduce myself. Hi, I'm Aonkita De. I'm a senior year student of BRAC University, the economics department, and minoring in international development and mathematics. I'll be a bit honest, I feel a little out of my depth because the people speaking with me in this panel, they're very qualified and very competent, and I'm still learning the process, and hopefully we'll get to be one of them very soon. So we have all been talking about the July Revolution, as we should. And everyone has different opinions on whether it was a revolution, whether it was a regime change. But one thing that we can agree on is that the revolution or the protests, it was very equitable in the sense that we saw representation from all fronts of society. We saw women on the front lines, we saw the trans community joining, we had rickshaw pullers who, they wanted to carry people to hospitals who were injured without any cost. So the whole process of reaching, the regime change was very equitable, and everyone got to be a part of it. But the moment it was time for nation building, we once again saw that we went back to the same patterns. We went back to a ethnically majoritarian, a religiously majoritarian, mostly male-dominated groups of people making decisions for all of us. And I've been asked to talk about inclusivity in social change and how to avoid elite capture. But we have to ask ourselves what elite really means. Because we have this notion, whenever we hear the word elite, we have this notion of economic elites, right? They are a wealthy class of people who get to decide for the rest of society. But I personally believe that the whole idea of elites, it's a bit different and it's not as black and white. And I'll explain this with one example. So last year, the interim government, they formed a Women's Reform Commission. And basically, the Women's Reform Commission had the task of curating, discussing, and coming up with a bunch of policies and suggestions that would benefit women all across the country. However, what we saw was a lot of backlash from religious elements and factions. But the reason why they were resisting the Women's Reform Commission was because they believed that the Women's Reform Commission did not represent the true essence of the most of the women of this country. They believed that the women in the Women's Reform Commission happened to be a bunch of upper-class elite women who do not represent the needs, the priorities, or the goals that most women in this country have, who, according to them, happen to be women who would like to not be that, not be that ambitious or assertive. They would much rather stay within the vicinity of their households, and that's what they believe represents the true essence or the stories of most Bangladeshi women. And the allegation that they were raising was that the Women's Reform Commission was elitist. But if we really think about women in Bangladesh, is that really the case? Is it that black and white, that only upper-class women are working and lower-class, or women from a lower socioeconomic standpoint, they happen to not work? That's not really the case, because we see women working in tea estates, we see women working in factories, we see women in the RMG sector, we see women as domestic house help, right? We see women working everywhere in construction sites, you name it. So if you really look from their perspectives, then you might interpret the religious factions and their allegation of how the Women's Reform Commission is elitist, the religious factions may turn out to be elitist from the perspective of the women who are working day and night. Now, what do we do to avoid elite capture in social change? The obvious answer is inclusivity, and that's what we have been talking since the morning. But why is it so hard to have inclusivity, right? Why is it so hard to prevent exclusivity in society? The reason is that we do not like to share our resources. Like, even the people in this room, we would not like to admit it, but we would not like to share our resources, the capital that we have, and our power, which is basically a product of the first two. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because over the past 1 year, I have seen the same people who are my peers. They're educated, they're young, they have fought to get rid of a regime that was not giving them the right opportunities, that was not letting them live, that was basically keeping them out of a system that they deserve to be a part of, right? They fought for their opportunities. They fought for a place at the table. But I saw the same people when it was the time for the indigenous communities to ask for their demands. When Chittagong Hill Tracts bled, I see people from like classes that I attend not understanding where they come from. When garments workers, when they strike, when they go on hunger strikes or block roads because they desperately need to raise their wages or like at least get their wages because the factory workers are not giving them. I see women who, again, always keeps being left out from the system, is not represented. I see them getting angry, complaining, and not understanding where they're coming from. And I believe that, yes, just as we're discussing here right now, just as the goal of this conference, the youth, and just as everyone who has been raising this matter over and over again, the youth needs to be included, of course. But I'm not sure if that's the end. I'm not sure if that's the solution. Because if it's only the youth being included, but the youth ourselves, if we do not think about including other groups who are being systematically being left out of the system, I'm not sure if that's true inclusivity, right? So what I believe is that, of course, as the youth in this room, as the youth of this country, we need to fight to be included. But if we do not fight to include other groups as well, we are not going to be any different from the previous generations that we are fighting so hard to differentiate ourselves from. I guess that's all I'll say. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Aonkita, for being so honest and really doing this self-examination. I think that's so important. We can take inclusivity to be just a self-explanatory good, but you have really problematized the issue. Is it the end state? Are we talking of double standards here? And why is it so hard to be inclusive in all the layers that happens to be the case? So thank you again for that. And finally, we come to Bhuiyan Asaduzzaman, and I should mention that Aonkita introduced herself. Namira Shameem is a senior research associate at PPRC, and Shamir Shehab is the president of the Bangladesh Youth Environment Initiative. Now we have a researcher from a youth-led think tank, DAIRA, Bhuiyan Asaduzzaman, who will be actually talking on that another angle for social progress. You know, we talked of political economy, we talked of governance of power and democracy. How do the youth perspective on these issues run these days? Bhuiyan Asaduzzaman.
Thank you very much, sir. I am Asad. I was formerly a student activist, now professionally a researcher. So I would request that I would like to speak in Bengali, if it's okay. Because like the kind of vibe I'm in, only it requires my mother language to vent in. So, ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে। জাস্ট অঙ্কিতার কথা আমি শুনছিলাম, তো ইনক্লুসিভিটির কথা আসছিল। অ্যান্ড আমার যে টপিক অ্যাসাইন করা হয়েছে সেটা তিনটা কিওয়ার্ড আর কি, পাওয়ার, ডেমোক্রেসি, গভর্নেন্স। So, you know, what is at the heart of the problem? হোয়াট ইজ পাওয়ার অ্যাকচুয়ালি? আমরা যদি হিস্ট্রিক্যালি পাওয়ারের বিষয়টা দেখি, তো আমরা দেখব যে বিফোর এনলাইটেনমেন্ট, মিডল এজে পাওয়ার মানে বলা হতো যে অ্যাকচুয়ালি দ্য মনোপলি টু ইন্টারপ্রেট দ্য স্ক্রিপচার্স। যারা হচ্ছে টেক্সটকে কন্ট্রোল করে, লাইক বাইবেল, কোরআন অর আদার টেক্সট, তারাই হচ্ছে বেসিক্যালি পাওয়ারটাকে এক্সার্ট করতে পারে। সো যখন হচ্ছে আমরা আধুনিক রাষ্ট্রে আমরা প্রবেশ করলাম, এটা স্লাইটলি ট্রান্সফর্ম করে হলো যে যারা আসলে লকে ইন্টারপ্রেট করে তারাই বেসিক্যালি হচ্ছে পাওয়ারটাকে এক্সার্ট করতে পারে। সো ইন আ পার্লামেন্টারি স্টেট লাইক বাংলাদেশ, লকে আসলে কারা তৈরি করে, কারা লকে ইন্টারপ্রেট করে, এটার দিকে তাকালে আমরা বুঝবো যে আসলে পাওয়ার জিনিসটা কিভাবে কাজ করে। সো পাওয়ার এটাকে আসলে কিভাবে ব্যবহার করা যায়? পাওয়ারকে আসলে দুইভাবে ব্যবহার করা যায়। একটা হচ্ছে পাওয়ার এজ কোয়ারশন আর পাওয়ার এজ সার্ভিস। মানে পাওয়ারে আমি কেন যেতে চাই, সেটা কি হচ্ছে আমি পাওয়ারটাকে আমার সেলফ বিহেস্টে ব্যবহার করে একটা স্ট্যাটাস কো তৈরি করব, নাকি হচ্ছে পাওয়ারটার সাথে রাষ্ট্রের সাথে সোসাইটির যে সোশ্যাল কন্ট্রাক্ট তৈরি হয়, সেই সোশ্যাল কন্ট্রাক্টের ভিত্তিতে একটা গ্রুপ অফ পিপল এম্পাওয়ার্ড হয়ে সোসাইটিকেই সার্ভ করবে। এই দুইটা কোয়েশ্চেনের মাধ্যমেই বেসিক্যালি আমরা পুরো সোশ্যাল প্রোগ্রেসের আইডিয়াটাকে আমরা ব্যাখ্যা করতে পারি, যদি আমরা প্রোগ্রেসটাকে অ্যাজ ইডিওলজিক্যালি বিবেচনা করে আপহিবাল অর্থে ধরে নিতে পারি আর কি। সো সোশ্যাল প্রোগ্রেস বা সামাজিক অগ্রগতির আসলে ফ্যাক্টরগুলো কি? একটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ ফ্যাক্টর হচ্ছে যে আমার হিউম্যান ক্যাপিটাল ডেভেলপ হচ্ছে কিভাবে, সেটার দিকে আলোকপাত করা। আর একটা বড় বিষয় হচ্ছে যে সোসাইটির মধ্যে, কমিউনিটিগুলোর মধ্যে যে সমস্ত ধ্যান ধারণা, আচার, ধর্মীয় বিশ্বাস, সেগুলোর মধ্যে একটা হারমোনিয়াস অবস্থান, ভারসাম্যপূর্ণ অবস্থান। এর বাইরে হচ্ছে পলিটিক্সের মধ্যে কনসেনসাস বিল্ডিং প্রক্রিয়া, ঐক্যমত তৈরি করার প্রক্রিয়া, ন্যাশনাল ভিশন তৈরি করার প্রক্রিয়া, এই তিনটা জিনিস কতটুকু স্বাভাবিকভাবে হচ্ছে সেটা খুবই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। এবং এই জায়গাটাকে আমরা আসলে দেখতে চাই হচ্ছে তরুণদের পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে। আমরা যারা তরুণ আছি, তরুণদের পার্সপেক্টিভ।
Asad, if you allow, can I just, for the global audience, just translate what you said in a very short manner? I'll take 2 minutes. So, Olivier and my colleagues from the global sort of chat box, I mean, Bhuiyan Asaduzzaman, what he was mentioning is about how ideas of power has evolved over time. In an earlier era, power was about controlling the scripture and how that is interpreted within society. Then it evolved into power as interpreting law, making and interpreting law, defining those for society as a whole. So this is so important to unpack the idea of power actually and how it really becomes a reality within societies. That's what Asad was mentioning, and he also mentioned these two broad dimensions of power we need to really, which animates our imagination. One is power to dominate or to coerce, and the other is power as being able to serve. So these are fundamentally different ideas of power. And he's talking of a social contract where three layers are so important. One is the human capital, the other is the harmonious coexistence, and the third is the consensus building processes within politics and society, which really contributes to the social contract. Asad, please resume.
Thank you. So, যেটা বলছিলাম যে তরুণদের পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে যখন আমরা আসলে দেখার চেষ্টা করি যে কিভাবে পাওয়ার কাজ করে, কিভাবে পাওয়ার আসলে ডেমোক্রেসির আইডিয়াকে প্রভাবিত করে এবং সেটার ভিত্তিতে গভর্নেন্সের সিনারিওগুলো বিল্ড হয়, তো আমরা দেখতে পাই যে আমাদের রিসেন্ট এক্সপিরিয়েন্সে হচ্ছে জুলাই গণ অভ্যুত্থানের স্মৃতি এখনো তাজা। সো আমরা এরপর থেকে যতগুলো এরকম ফোরামে আমরা গিয়েছি, সব জায়গায় মোটামুটি তরুণদের কাছ থেকে একটা অপটিমিস্টিক পজিশন আমরা দেখতে পেয়েছি। কিন্তু সমস্যাটা হচ্ছে এই যে অপটিমিস্টিক পজিশন, এই যে আমাদের হিস্ট্রিক্যাল মেমোরির মধ্যে সবসময় ছিল তরুণদের মধ্যে। বাট দ্য কোয়েশ্চেন ইজ, তাহলে কেন হচ্ছে আমরা এই সোশ্যাল আপহিভাল করতে পারছি না, সোশ্যাল প্রোগ্রেস করতে পারছি না? কোথায় গিয়ে এটা স্টাম্বলিং ব্লকে আটকা পড়ে যাচ্ছে? Here comes the crude reality that actually our elites, Aonkita was talking about the ideation of elites. So elites, basically business elites, political elites and cultural elites. These three types of elites, they are failing to grasp the expectation of our generation or all the young generation in history. Because they are interpreting power in a way that distorts the idea of democracy. You can draw examples from the last regime that, like, to be able to run an election was the prime definition of democracy. Was it that? Actually to na, ashole amader ekhane jodi human capital development scenario amra dekhi, amader শিক্ষা খাতের কি অবস্থা, আমাদের স্বাস্থ্য খাতের কি অবস্থা, আমাদের শিল্প ইন্ডাস্ট্রিটা মানে আমাদের যেটা কালচারাল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি সেটা কি অবস্থা? সে ফর দ্য এক্সাম্পল অফ ফিল্ম ইন্ডাস্ট্রি, আমাদের যারা কালচারাল মিনিস্টার ছিল লাস্ট রেজিমে, আমরা কি একটা মেমোরেবল ইনস্টিটিউশনের কথা বলতে পারি যেটা তারা তৈরি করে যেতে পেরেছে? আমার ফিল্ম ইন্ডাস্ট্রি তো নাই আসলে। সো একটা ন্যাশনাল ইমাজিনেশন তৈরি করার যেই কল কবজাগুলো আমার থাকা দরকার, প্রত্যেকটা কল কবজা আমার আছে, কিন্তু এগুলোকে কিভাবে চালাতে হবে আমি জানি না। আওয়ার লিডার্স আর ফেইলিং আস। জুলাই গণঅভ্যুত্থানের পরে সবচেয়ে বড় যে জায়গাটাতে
Asad, 2 more minutes.
তর্ক তৈরি হয়েছিল সেটা হচ্ছে যে সংস্কার প্রক্রিয়া। সবচেয়ে বড় দুইটা সংস্কারের জায়গা ছিল জনপ্রশাসন এবং হচ্ছে পুলিশ সংস্কার। জনপ্রশাসন আর পুলিশ সংস্কার কিন্তু পুরো সংস্কারের এজেন্ডা থেকে হারিয়ে গেছে। কেন? বিকজ the people who are dealing with power are reluctant. So আপনি দেখতে পাবেন যে প্রত্যেকটা জায়গাতে এভাবে তরুণরা যা চাচ্ছে সেই ফ্যাসিলিটেশনটা দেয়া হচ্ছে না। আমার আর্গুমেন্ট হচ্ছে বাংলাদেশের বিজনেস এলিট যারা আছে এদের ক্যারেক্টার বাই ডিফল্ট লুম্পেন চরিত্রের। তারা কখনোই হচ্ছে ন্যাশনাল বুর্জোয়া হয়ে উঠতে চায় না। আমাদের পাশেই ইন্ডিয়াতেই এই এক্সাম্পল গুলো আছে। টাটার কথা যদি আমি বলি, দে বিকেম ন্যাশনাল বুর্জোয়া বাই বিল্ডিং ইনস্টিটিউশনস। আমাদের এখানকার যারা পলিটিক্যাল এলিটস আছে তারা কখনো কনসেনসাস বিল্ডিং প্রক্রিয়ার দিকে যেতে চায় না। তারা হচ্ছে তাদের যে গোষ্ঠী স্বার্থ বা পার্টিজান ইন্টারেস্ট তার বাইরে তারা যেতে চায় না। এবং জুলাই গণঅভ্যুত্থানের পরেই আমরা এগুলো দেখতে পাচ্ছি, পলিটিক্যাল ডাইনামিক্স এগুলো দেখা যাচ্ছে যে ন্যাশনাল এক্সপেকটেশন। 3 আগস্ট যে সমস্ত তরুণরা শহীদ মিনারে এক দফার ঘোষণা দিয়েছিল, তারা বলেছিল যে ফ্যাসিবাদী ব্যবস্থার বিলোপ এবং একটা নতুন বন্দোবস্তের কথা। নতুন বন্দোবস্তটা কোথায়? এখানে তো তরুণরা সবাই চাচ্ছে যে তারা এম্পাওয়ার্ড হবে, কিন্তু তাদেরকে এম্পাওয়ার করার জন্য যে সমস্ত সোশ্যাল পকেটস গুলোকে অ্যাক্টিভেট করা দরকার সেগুলোকে অ্যাক্টিভেট করা হচ্ছে না, এখনো পর্যন্ত হচ্ছে না। কারণ গত 1.5 বছরে আমরা দেখেছি আমাদের শিক্ষা সংস্কার কমিশনটা তৈরি করা হয়নি। সো শিক্ষার ব্যাপারে আমার ন্যাশনাল ভিশনটা কি? আমার বর্তমানে বাংলাদেশে 25 লক্ষের বেশি বেকার আছে যারা ম্যাক্সিমাম এডুকেটেড। তাদেরকে আমি কোথায় জব প্লেসমেন্ট করব? এই যে একটা হিউজ ডেমোগ্রাফিক ডিভিডেন্ট আছে, এদেরকে নিয়ে আমি ঠিক কোথায় যাব, এটা নিয়ে আমার কাছে কোনো ন্যাশনাল ভিশন নেই। সো এই জন্য সোশ্যাল প্রোগ্রেসটা বেসিক্যালি ফ্যাসিলিটেট করা যাচ্ছে না। এখন এখানে কোয়েশ্চেনটা হচ্ছে বেসিক্যালি আমরা কার কাছে নালিশ করছি? নালিশটা কার কাছে করছি অ্যাকচুয়ালি? অঙ্কিতাও একই কথাগুলো বলছিল, ইনক্লুশনের কথাগুলো বলছিল, নামিরা বলছিল, সামিশা বলছিল। দ্য কোয়েশ্চেন ইজ অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমরা কার কাছে নালিশ করছি? যার কাছে নালিশ করছি সে তো আসলে শোনার জন্য প্রস্তুত না। প্রস্তুত থাকলেও সে আসলে সেটা বাস্তবায়ন করবে না। সেখানেই আসলে কোয়েশ্চেনটা আসে যে যখন পলিটিক্যাল কোয়েশ্চেন্স গুলো সমাধান হচ্ছে না, তখন আসলে ওয়ে আউটটা কি সোশ্যাল প্রোগ্রেসের? The way out is very simple: to activate the civil society, to activate the civil society in a way that they can spearhead the evolution process. So আমাদের পজিশনটা এই মুহূর্তে হওয়া উচিত বেসিক্যালি, কারণ পলিটিক্যাল সিচুয়েশন ইজ ভলাটাইল। উই ডোন্ট নো হোয়াট পলিটিক্যাল পার্টিজ আর গোনা আপহোল্ড হোয়াট এজেন্ডা, উই ডোন্ট নো। সো আমাদেরকে যেটা করতে হবে, প্রত্যেকটা স্ফিয়ারে, প্রত্যেকটা পকেটস গুলোর মধ্যে খুবই স্ট্রং রোবাস্ট সোশ্যাল মুভমেন্টস তৈরি করতে হবে। সোশ্যাল মুভমেন্টস গুলাকে তৈরি করার ভিতর দিয়ে কনসিস্টেন্স বিল্ডিং প্রক্রিয়াতে যেতে হবে, পাবলিক অপিনিয়ন তৈরি করতে হবে, যাতে করে যারা পলিটিক্যাল অ্যাক্টরস আছে, যারা বিজনেস অ্যাক্টরস আছে, তারা যেন এগুলোকে তাদের এজেন্ডার মধ্যে ইনক্লুড করতে বাধ্য হয়। সো এই প্রক্রিয়ার ভিতর দিয়ে আমরা এই মুহূর্তে যারা তরুণ আছি, তারা এই সোশ্যাল মুভমেন্টস গুলোকে আমরা পরিচালিত করতে পারি এবং সেটাকে জাতীয় রূপান্তর প্রক্রিয়ায় আমরা স্থানান্তর করতে পারি। ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে।
Thank you, Asad. And for the benefit of Olivier and the colleagues from around the world, this last part was about that youth are always optimistic, but social progress not happening. That's the contradiction. Why? So the power, the elite orientations, these matter in terms of explaining why this progress is not happening. And Asad also posed a question: whom are we complaining to? If the powers that be are not listening, whom are we complaining to? Should we reverse the paradigm? Instead of complaining to, should we focus on identifying and harnessing our own energies within social processes, within civic pockets, etc.? So that's where I think our final panelists concluded. So we have had these 4 important interventions, and I think I will turn it over to you, Olivier, now. If you have any questions from the chat box, etc., if you are, would like to hear, or even your reflections on what you heard on this from the 4 young panelists in Dhaka. Olivier Bouin.
Thank you, Hossain, and really congratulations for a fantastic panel. And the 4 speakers were, in a sense, really humbling, in a sense, because we've heard so many insightful comments and proposals that will make this treasure. Hossain is part of the board of directors of IPSP, and we make sure, because that's something we've been, in a sense, not struggling with, but aiming at, put in Asad's words, aiming at to include more, in a sense, this perspective into the, I would say, the power battle at the 3 levels he mentioned: business, political, and cultural. So this type, and I would like to congratulate the Power and Participation Research Center for organizing such a meeting, a day-long meeting, and allowing us to broadcast this live globally. And this will be available in replay. And I would like to mention that this will be also available with subtitling in different languages to also to address Asad's point. The idea is to be accessible to a wider audience that is not necessarily only English speaking, obviously. And the idea is really to make your remarks accessible to a larger number of stakeholders, of people in the conversation. So before, allow me, so really congratulations to you, Hossain, and your team, but also to the 4 speakers who addressed climate justice, economic justice, inclusion, and governance and power so masterfully. So before I turn to 3 questions we had on the chat, and the chair of the International Panel on Social Progress, Professor Marc Flaubert, is also attending live the meeting. I would like to share 3 quick comments and come very quickly to the questions. So the first one, and it comes across things that have been said. And by the way, I don't like to be like hanging over you like a kind of a big brother. I would like very much to sit, next to you and be considered as the partner in the conversation, which I really are. So I think, first of all, we don't need to take, young people or the youth as an addition to an ongoing conversation, but really need to take them into account as stakeholders. And stakeholders not only in the conversation, but also stakeholders in the design of solutions and in the implementation of solutions. That's something that, we don't want to, tick the box of diversity and inclusion by inviting I would say, young people with the huge diversity that it covers as a generic term in the conversation, but really in the design of solutions, in the implementation, and in the, I would say, the power battle that you have to fight, in a sense. The second comment is basically on what Aonkita said, and Namira also, how to include minorities, fragilized communities, underrepresented voices in the conversation, in the design of solutions, in the implementation, and a theme dear to Marc Fleury's heart, how do we measure what we value? And in the we need to be inclusive, and in order to define and democratize the measurement. And there is a specific working group within the International Panel on Social Progress that is entitled Measuring What We Value, and I'm sure that Namira and all of you, you will be, I think, involved in the next round of the discussion on democratizing measurement and trying to get views that are more inclusive into the measurement design. And the third is based on what Aonkita said about the coordination in a sense of social groups, of social justice claims. How do you, in a sense, articulate and make, and it goes to Asad's point as well, how do you, or Samir's point, how do you articulate these social justice or climate justice or economic justice claims in a way that it is not only claims, but it becomes, pressures that are heard and that are impactful in the design of, policy making. So all this is really coming across a lot of themes that we engage with in the International Panel on Social Progress. And I really very much invite not only the four speakers, but I'm sure that through PPRC, we'll be able to, channel some of the energy in the room within our working groups, and also, importantly, to connect with other realities in other, global North and global South or Greater South countries. So it's really important that we keep this discussion alive. So I have two, sorry to be long, but it was so of the highest quality that we wanted to acknowledge and take account of that. So I come quickly to the three questions, and Namira, Marc Fleury has one specifically for you, but maybe I will go for three more generic questions so that the panelists can, answer the way they would like to. So the first one is, at what point of the participatory or the participation, implementation, decision-making chain do you think it would be most important to be heard, involved, and impactful? So you've been describing, all of you, a kind of a power map. At what point, and what would be the specific areas or the specific elements of the power chain you would think it would be important to be involved, heard, and impactful? The second comment, and maybe I will stop with the second question, is how to better include young people in governance at all levels. It's related to this, including in particular in IPSP work. This will take care of that. But is it just a matter of having young people participate alongside older people, or is it about to have special bodies representing the perspectives of the youth? And this is something that is important because in order to be heard, you have to, in a sense, organize. We've been talking about social groups. We've been talking about civil society. How do you see your voices being heard and impactful? And what type of mobilization through mediated mobilization you think might be the most important ones? So I would start with these two questions, Hossain.
Thank you. So let me turn to my panelists here. And you don't have to really continue on the particular topic that I assigned to you. Each of you can take up. There are two questions. One is, it's a question of how to get engaged, where. So Olivier mentioned about the power chain. You know, is it about the idea level? Is it about the design level? Is it about the implementation level, monitoring level, etc.? So that's one question. And the other one is, as Olivier also mentioned, we want to include the youth. But beyond that, how do you include them? Are they to be in the same room as the non-youth, the elders? Are there special bodies of youth that we should do? We heard from the floor, by the way, Olivier, in the morning session about the urgency of youth councils or youth assemblies, regional, local, etc., etc. So there are, this question also figured in our morning session about forms of organizing, which forms really matter. So you are free to, and Olivier, do you want to add the question from Mark so that we have all the questions? No, we can't hear you. Sorry, we can't hear you yet.
Sorry, I'm switching from one screen to the other, not in order to make much noise. No, Mark's question, the generic one was already put in the pipeline. The other one is more about, it's more specific to measurement and asking if you have like ideas about how to better measure the well-being of the youth, given that most of their lives will be lived in the future. And that's something that how to take account of future prospects for the assessment of inequalities and well-being among the youth. These are, I think, important questions that would maybe need some kind of, in-depth treatment.
Okay, good.
But these are important aspects if you want to democratize and have more, adequate assessment and measurement of well-being.
So we have 3 questions. We have 4 panelists. Aonkita wants to go whichever you want to answer, but we'll be mindful of the time, so just take maybe 2 to 3 minutes max.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So if I'm not wrong, the question was about when do we include the people that we are trying to help? So is it during the formulation of the project? Is it during the implementation? Or is it during like when the outcome is reached? And I believe that there has to be consistent participation. Now, it sounds very easy, but the problem is that, and again, I believe that this is a problem that even we may have, which is that whenever we're trying to help a group that we believe are either powerless or have fewer resources than us or just need our help, we might carry some biases or some notions of how they might not know as much as us, they might not know what's the best for us, and there might be some intervention from our part even when it's not necessary or like when it should not happen. So I believe that we should really check ourselves and make sure that their voices are consistently heard throughout the project. I also would like to bring in, if we're not short on time, may I bring in an analogy?
Please, please.
So again, because I'm a student of economics, I like to gravitate back towards my major. So as Amartya Sen, like he has a very famous idea, which is the capabilities approach, and he he explains it through a very simple example, which is that there's a bicycle and it represents a resource, and if you're giving the bicycle to someone, it may represent that you're helping them out. But if the person happens to be disabled and they may not be able to use the bicycle, which means that the resource that is being imparted to them is basically of no use. Or if there happens to be roads around them which are very unsafe to travel on, which means that even though they have a bicycle, they may not be, it may not be of any use to them. So it's not just about delivering resources to people that need them, it's about making sure that right kind of resources are delivered to them. And because of this, we need their consistent participation.
Thank you. Thank you. Asad, you want to go? Okay. So we'll go from left and then to right.
So I would like to address the second question. So how to include the youth into the system. So the first of all, we have to restore the social characteristics into the society, because the society is broadly ceased to exist because the impact of individualism, the automation of self has made the individual too much vulnerable and fragile. So decision making in a free manner in this structure has become very difficult. So we have to restore the social characteristics. We have to restore the idea of complements, and also accountability in a manner that everybody is at the same time complementing the system, and at the same time the system is accountable to them. And secondly, since the question of inclusion is at the structure level, we have to democratize the access into the structure. So we have to reduce the asymmetry into the information flow. And also we have to incentivize the youth in a way that whatever they do for the society, the social welfare activism, they should be incentivized. In that way, there can be possibility to directly connect their contribution with the mainstream structural system. And then we have to create a sphere where merit is more important than any other thing. If you are capable, then you can go up the ladder. This should be the process. So in this way, in a combination of all these characteristics, we can include the youth into the mainstream system, and also we can make the power structure more accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad. Namira, you want to go ahead?
I would like to speak on the second question of whether we want young people in the room or do we want networks or organized voices. So I would say both, actually, because often we see that even amongst youth groups or organized networks of youth, a lot of people still feel, a lot of the youth still feel unheard. So for example, if it's earlier discussions from today, we've heard that a lot of these youth groups are Dhaka-based, or a lot of these groups which are getting the platform to speak are based in the capital, right? So it's important to bring in then groups from outside of the capital or from grassroots. It's also important to hear individual voices, because one individual voice may bring up a point that an organized party cannot convey, right? So I think in that case, both are important. On the first question of at which point of the power chain would we want the youth to be included, I would say that, as Aonkita also mentioned, we would want them to have consistent participation. And that does not necessarily mean that we want one youth representative across all positions, right? Or one consistent voice in the entire process. You can bring in youth which fits the bill of that position, or according to their strengths, of course, according to merit. So those are the points.
Excellent, excellent point. Shamir? You can take this one.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
I think the first two questions are responded very well by my co-panelists. I will take the third one, and that is on the well-being. How do you actually measure it? I think that's $1 million question. I wish I could respond to that, but I think I will situate my response in the context of climate environment and broader the well-being growth versus degrowth narrative. So I think if I'm sure Zillur sir is familiar with, the Simon Kuznets was asked to how do you measure the national income, and made a report to the US Congress in 1934. And he himself, if we are asked to today, I'm pretty sure he would say that GDP shouldn't be taken as a sole measure of development and progress. So if I ask in this room, last 15 or even last 50, 60 years, if we are asked, if we hear that Bangladesh is হচ্ছে যে উন্নয়নের জোয়ারে ভেসে যাচ্ছে, how do you measure it? Like the answer is হচ্ছে GDP হচ্ছে তো আমাদের GDP is increasing by every year 6.2, 6.3. But we know that this data actually আগে ঠিক করা হয়েছে কত % and then back in the data গুলো হচ্ছে যে ঠিক করা হয়েছে. How do you actually support that statistics? But anyway, that's another discussions. But point I was my point here is So GDP দিয়ে হচ্ছে measure করা হচ্ছে আমার development বা progress, whatever we would like to term it. But let's say আমরা আজকে যে the lunch that we have had, instead of one plate, if we had 3 plates of lunch, GDP, it contributes to the GDP, and GDP would actually be higher. Those who smoke, if you, instead of consuming 1 cigarette, if you smoke 5, it's actually contributing to the GDP, but it's not really necessarily capturing the well-being of the society. So I think we are not really in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, when the argument was, you first pollute first, and then we will clean it up. But I think we are at a very critical juncture of the human civilizations, where majority of the earth system scientists would say we are on the kind of heading towards the 6th mass extinction. I don't want sound to be alarming, but you really look into what inside, there are genuine reasons to be concerned about that. So we are not in the 1960s and 70s. We are overshooting, as I in my initial remarks said, 7 of the planetary boundaries. So I think we really need to think beyond GDP, that's realistically capture the true essence of the progress, not really linear way of looking into the material growth of it. And that's where I think the young people with a fresh mind should really push the boundaries of the frontier of how we think about it. I think with that I will end.
Thank you. Olivier, I hope our panelists did justice to your questions. And I'll just add my one bit on the measurement issue. What I feel is that, I know we have a working group on the measuring what we value. That's already taken into account. But from this panel, and my reaction here is that there are 3 aspects to this question of democratizing measurement. One is a question which is a technical question, how to measure. So that's indicators and all that. But then the second question is which lived experiences get to the discussion table itself. I mean, we are maybe discussing, say, measuring, economic progress, etc. But say the lives in the slums do not make to the discussion table itself. So the democratization means also which lived experiences are brought within our cognizance. In the hill tracts, if there is this land acquisition is leading to major dramatic harm to their traditional production system, if that lived experience hasn't traveled to our consciousness in terms of this lived experience needs to be taken into account. So I think democratizing also means it's a different way of saying voices, but I would want to put the emphasis on lived experience. And the third is what, what we value part of it, meaning the idea of end goals. How are we understanding well-being? Is it in terms of, certainly in terms of prosperity, but I think there was this discussion about and I think Gala, from our friend from Argentina, keeps talking about this breakdown of the social fabric. This morning we heard about this noise in the digital space, how people are in a continuous state of mental unrest. So those sort of the well-being, Namira talked about emotional well-being. So I think there is these 3 levels at which we should be taking this idea of democratizing measurement. One is end goals, a better understanding of a consensus on end goals, on ensuring that all the lived experiences are in the table to decide which are the end goals which need to be prioritized. And then it's a technical question of how to measure. All those together, in my view, might enter into this discussion about democratizing measurement. But if there is any further question, if not, any last word from Olivier, from you?
Yes, just No, that's fantastic, and thank you for the answers or the comments on the questions. No, just to relate to, please be engaged with the International Panel on Social Progress. It's one of the fora that might be, in a sense, inclusive in the ways you would like to be included in the conversation and in the various, elements of the conversation. So at the various stages, I would say, of the conversation. And please let me just flag that you are part of the Global Social Progress Week, and I'd just like to mention 2 sessions that might be of interest to you. One is with our colleague Marc Fleurblay on the Manifest for Responsible Economy. So for those who might be interested, you can look at the website and connect to this session. And tomorrow we have an interesting session also on towards a regenerative democracy, i.e. not only democracy in the economic space, but democracy in society, democracy in the firm, democracy in the family. So democracy as a muscle that needs to be trained in order then to be expressed in the political realm. So just 2 examples of the themes that we are dealing with, and really count on the outstanding work you're doing and the ideas and the energy you bring in to be fully included in the forthcoming steps of the International Panel on Social Progress. Thank you very much, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Olivier. I will extend your invitation to the assembled audience in the big room here, which you are perhaps not seeing them. But the সবার জন্য বলছি, the International Panel on Social Progress, IPSP, if you Google that on the internet, you will find a whole lot of information about this. It's a global network of scientists, of activists, of thinkers, of doers. And I'm, on behalf of Olivier and the board of IPSP, I'm also extending an invitation to all of you in the room to really get to know the IPSP better. And there are various opportunities to also get connected and to engage in there. So with that, I think we have come to the end of the session, right? All right, Olivier, I think we'll say goodbye from Dhaka to you. Thank you, and to all the members who connected globally. And congratulations and good luck to the rest of the Global Social Progress Week. Thank you very much, Olivier.
Thank you very much to you, to all of you.
All right, thank you. এই সাথে আমরা, I want to again thank our panel, Shamir, Namira, Aonkita, and Asad is left. And সকালে যারা সবাই participate করেছেন, এতক্ষণ যারা শুনেছেন, your presence really made it a very important, যেটা বলা যায় যে একটা pressure for us to be more coherent, for more meaningful, to push ourselves to be really make better sense of what we are talking about. আমরা এটা তো আজকে আমাদের পিপিআরসির এই 3 বছরের প্রজেক্টের আজকে শুরু হলো, but with many of the actors in the room, including in the panel, আমরা আশা করছি as we move forward, আমরা আপনাদের সবার সাথে নানাভাবে engaged হব, future events হবে, but not just events, but also processes, initiatives, surveys, যেগুলোতে আশা করি we will also be able to engage your interest and attention. And collectively, আমরা আশা করি, this is just a project, but our interest and I'm sure আমাদের সবার সম্মিলিত আকাঙ্ক্ষা is larger than any project, etc. আমরা সবাই চাই বাংলাদেশকে আরেকটা হাইটে নিয়ে যেতে, যেখানে youth and the idea of justice and appropriate engagement of the youth is a very important part of that just transition. আজকে সকাল থেকে আমরা এখানে আছি. I don't think I felt an enormous sense of energy in the room, not feeling tired at all, but I should warn that আর চালাবো না আমরা, টায়ার্ড না হলেও আমরা এখন সমাপ্তি টানবো. So thank you সবাইকে আবারও অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ. PPRC team really played a really fantastic task, এবং যারা technically organized করেছেন, Hotel Intercontinental treated us not just as a customer, but also as a friend actually. In the way পুরো রুমটা আমরা অর্ধেক বুক করেছিলাম, they said that আপনারা পুরোটাই নেন আর বাড়তি চার্জ দিতে হবে না. So I feel that they are also partners, and this is the type of mood and sense of partnership that we want to build as we move forward. Thank you all. And আজকে আমরা এখানেই শুভ অপরাহ্ন বলে এই একদিনের যে ন্যাশনাল কনভিনিং সেটাকে সমাপ্ত ঘোষণা করছি. অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ. কালকে আসবো. চিন্তা দুটা না? ও